Welcome to Mentor. I'm Marco Bertozzi.
And I'm Rachel Ford.
How you doing, Rach?
I'm not so
nice
bad,
to see you.
Nice to see you.
So today we have a fab guest, Jon O'Donnell.
Media legend.
And
founder.
Friend of many and founder of Viral Tribe, where we're sat today.
Yeah, he's had a very long and successful career and it seems like he's just getting started.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I thought, I love the way he started life from a very creative perspective, drama, 20 odd years of really commercial leadership, and then has now come home to creativity again. Found his spiritual home again, back in very creative environment. So it was nice to hear.
And he's
journey.
Got such an energy. He's probably the funniest man in media, after you, obviously, Marco. But he's incredibly funny. But I think, it's just amazing to hear his whole career and how actually now in his own business, running Viral Tribe, he's at the centre of all decisions and he's very quick to make decisions, because I think potentially over his corporate career, sometimes it's very difficult to just make those decisions, but he actually said he regrets the decisions he didn't make more than the ones he did. And that's one of my favourite sayings. I love that, you won't regret the decisions you do make, but you may regret the decisions you don't. So that chimed for me as well. And so I think that's, another good episode coming up.
Yeah, let's get him in.
So, joining us now is top media industry mogul Jon O'Donnell, founder and CEO at Viral Tribe Entertainment, aka The Boss. Not to be confused with Bruce Springsteen. This is Jon O'Donnell. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you very much for having me.
How are you?
Welcome, Jon.
How's your week?
I'm all right. The week is okay, actually. It's very busy, as it always is. But,
with your Ironman and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, I've done 3 Ironman this morning.
Before you week of it.
That was it. Yeah, so Carl, Jason, and... No, edit that out. It's all good. We've been really busy. We've got lots of exciting stuff happening with the studios at the moment. We've got new shows that we're working on. We are planning a pretty spectacular relaunch on Soho Radio fairly soon as well. So busy.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of your podcasts. Hopefully some people will listen to this one. But I think we're going to get into it. I think, Marco.
Let's go.
Let's go for it.
Well, I think the first thing we'd start with, Jon, is you've had a pretty long and distinguished career. And so what we want to do is hear about it, but we don't want you banging on too long. So you've got 60 seconds to talk about what is it, 30 years? 30 years of career.
Okay, well, 60 seconds is always going to be a tall order for me with anything.
No one's counting.
But I will give it a go. So where to start? Well, basically, I exited drama school knowing that I was a pretty terrible actor and was definitely not going to be good enough to be paid millions of pounds for doing stuff. So I then decided to become a rave MC and techno producer with some modest success, which effectively then became a springboard into classified advertising at The Guardian. And so then sort of a 30-year career in news brands. I worked at The Express, The Daily Star, The Mail on Sunday for 10 years. And then finally as the commercial MD of the Evening Standard, which following the purchase of the independent newspaper became ESI Media. So a fantastic long career in publishing. And then in 2022, I started Viral Tribe Entertainment to essentially support talent in the digital media space, which has kind of now evolved into the podcasting powerhouse that it is today. And then last year we acquired Soho Radio and podcast studios, where we're currently sat at the moment, to become a fully loaded music and podcast culture machine. But as I kind of said, it's a fantastic year we've got ahead. We've got a huge relaunch of Soho Radio. We're building a state-of-the-art video studio and a fantastic new slate of content for original releases as well to launch to market. So I've no idea if that was 60 seconds.
That was a lot,
but that's me.
It's as good as it's going to get.
And I've got to say, there's huge tranches we've missed out, but I'm going to come back to some of those. But if I can take your most recent endeavour, so Viral Tribe Entertainment, when you founded it, I know a lot of people said to me when I came out of my big corporate job, wow, that's either brave or bonkers or, very bold. And I remember saying to you, look, launching your own business, it's a bold and brave move. But you said to me, actually, I don't think it was the brave choice. What did you mean about that?
Yeah, I know. Absolutely the case. I mean, for me, I felt it was the least brave option.
Yeah.
I've been in publishing for nearly 30 years. I'd been sort of MD of ESI Media for, 10 years pretty much. And, coming out of that, all my legacy and all my heritage was in that space. And so I think the route one option would have been to have tried to get back into that industry and to go and basically, try and find a role that would fit me and suit me and all the rest of it. And the reality is, I didn't have the bravery to do that because after being in a role for 10 years, I was actually, I just felt a little bit like I couldn't take the rejection of that sort of industry kind of not finding a place for me. And I'm not sort of going into the kind of the age old cliches of age and demography and all the rest of it, but it was a very real thing. And I felt very nervous about the idea that I would, at a quite vulnerable time in my life, sort of be going back and putting myself out there just to be sort of rejected. And so actually I thought rather than go down that route, which I feel was probably the bravest route, I thought, well, actually, what do I really want to do with my life? Because I was at that point at my probably late 40s, and I kind of realised that this was a chance to do something else. And I kind of took stock, and what I really wanted to do was something that was more creative. I've always been a relatively creative individual, and I thought, well, no one's really going to give me that job because my CV doesn't lend itself to that kind of immediately walking into that kind of career. So I thought, well, I'm going to create something that allows me to do that. And I think from that perspective, it wasn't that brave because I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to pitch to anyone to do it. At that point, it was just a case of me moving from one space to another space. I think in hindsight, there is a path that you are, and I put inverted commas, supposed to take, which is where adjacent steps rather than giant leaps are probably more accepted by the people that you're trying to do business with. Yeah. So moving immediately from being almost a commercial advertising person in publishing to being a producer essentially and a creative person in audio is quite a big leap. And so I think if you want to achieve something relatively quickly, probably having a set of adjacent steps rather than that massive leap from one to the other is probably what I would sort of say going back. But I stand by it. I mean, I think I kind of ducked out of the hard yards, which would have been going back into market. But the reality is, I've never been happier doing what I'm doing. So I think it was definitely the wise decision.
Do you think when you listen to your career, actually, it's like the bookends are the bit that sort of excite you the most, like the drama at the start and the
100%.
That creativity, and you just happen to fill 25 years with commercial.
Yeah, it's 100%.
Obviously, there's creativity in that as well, and whatever. But it feels like you just waited to get to that point to.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think when I was at school, I was always really, really interested in everything creative. I was absolutely terrible at art, but when it came to things like drama and music or anything that involved kind of sort of a visual expression, creativity, I just absolutely loved, and it was what I wanted to do. And so again, I mean, to a degree, I probably bottled out of the acting thing a little bit because I didn't want the kind of the rejection that might potentially come with it. Music was great fun and it allowed me to do all the stuff that I wanted to do. But as the rave industry is not a long-term career for anybody who wants to live beyond a certain age. But you're absolutely right. I think the story of those 30 years that was spent in publishing, you could actually condense into me trying to find ways in which I could explore my creative side in a way that was still going to deliver value to those businesses. And that's pretty much spot on, I would say.
Yeah. And I think we're talking to people all the time who are at that pivotal point you were probably when, you came out of the corporate world. And I think listening to you is great encouragement for a lot of people, because I think there's a lot of people sat on the fence who, and I remember when I was looking for a job when I was consulting, and I remember I was deep into a big media job interview process, and I remember being awake all night one day, and I was like, why am I awake all night sort of worrying about this? And it wasn't because I was worried about not getting the job. I was actually worried about getting the job. And I'm like, that's surely not a great sign. So I think, hearing your making that leap and so on will be a big motivation.
Though. It is hard. And I think it's that kind of like, feel the fear and do it anyway. And like, I mean, I've got all these, I come out with all these bloody one-liners, like you're a long time dead. But it's like, it's almost like, for me, it's like that now or never.
Yeah.
And I think you'll regret the decisions you don't make versus 100%. The ones you do. But it's hard. And I think when you are in the corporate world, getting all that money, we get really almost locked in our jobs. So I think if we can give some people some inspiration, it's ups and downs, isn't it? But you feel alive, don't you?
I agree. I looking back at my corporate life, so to speak, I sort of almost view it as being sort of under anaesthetic to a degree, in that you are sort of anaesthetised. Every month, money drops into your account, and every month, if you knock it out of the park, or if you absolutely fuck it up completely, the median line only shifts by a couple of percent. Whereas when you are in your own business, your own space, your own endeavours, whatever it is, the highs and the lows are so accentuated. I mean, I get more excited now by winning a piece of business that's probably maybe a few £100 or a couple of grand or whatever it is, someone that's chosen to use our services, or
100%.
That I get incredibly excited about, to the degree that sometimes in my old world we'd have got a partnership that was worth 150 grand that we thought we might get, and it drops in, and you kind of like, okay, well, where's the next one? We're still not at our budget, we're still not X, we're still not Y. And so I think it's much more real, and I think that for me is the more healthy part of it. I mean, interestingly, when you mentioned then about sort of keep being awake at night for fear of getting a job and what that might come, actually, that really resonates with me, because there was a point quite early on, and I don't think at that point I'd even got to the stage where I was able to pay myself, even a regular modest salary of any description. So I was still very much in the early stages, and I remember I was approached by a headhunter, and they sort of said to me, look, there's this job, can we send you the CV? What do you think? And I looked at it, and it was a very kind of, route one sort of job. I won't say obviously what it was, but it was a decent job. It was a CEO type, publishing type role. And I had the first interview. It was decent money. It would have been security. It would have been all the things that I didn't currently have at that point, which were, a house with a mortgage and security and all those things. And it was a really weird, pivotal moment, because by the time I got through to the second interview, I was absolutely shitting myself, because I thought, I need to come up with a reason for these guys as to why I'm going to let them down to do the thing that's currently paying me no money and giving me the most love.
So true.
And that was exactly the position I got to.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fantastic. And also, we don't want to skip over 25 years of obviously.
I already have.
But actually, I was listening to a couple of your interviews from the past, and they're good reminders of actually, you did some quite brave stuff at the newspapers, right? You took the Evening Standard free. The Indie went digital only. So like they're big. They were big decisions at the time. I remember I was never really in the sort of press, but they always hit the radar as quite big decisions. When you look back on those, like how did you feel about going through those processes and making those leaps?
Interestingly, it sort of goes back to Rachel's point earlier. I think we saw them as almost the least brave decisions, because when you looked at the Evening Standard at that point, it was effectively dying. It was doing about 100 and something thousand circulation. The rest were all lesser rate sales. It had a distribution model that meant we were spending ridiculous amounts of money on every copy to get it sent up and down the country. I mean, we were shifting, what would have been back in the days, maybe 20 odd thousand copies down in a van to Brighton. We were now selling maybe 10 copies, but still sending the same van down to Brighton. So we had a really, really dysfunctional business model at that time. And when the Lebedevs sort of bravely took the newspaper on, and they invested in it, and we sort of came away from DMG, I think the reality was that after, whether it was 6 to 9 months of running it, it was very clear that there was no kind of easy win out of the hole that they were in. There was no there was no quick fix. And so I think one of the key reasons why the Lebedevs wanted to buy it was because, and if you remember the time, it was back in 2008, 2009. And the reason why they wanted to buy it first and foremost was because they wanted, a sort of a vehicle, if you like, a media vehicle that would see them, be able to report on the election, to get us to the London Olympics. There were some really big landmark events that they were excited about for obvious reasons. And so when we looked at it, it was pretty straightforward. It's like, look, if you put well, let's say 30 million quid into it. You can put 30 million quid into it. You can keep it as it is, and it will basically keep the lights on and trundle you through to 2012. But after that, you're out of gas and you're done. But you will get what you wanted to do, which is get you through that point. The other option is that you basically close it down and you just completely shut it, and no one will have a pop at you because you tried to revive it. But the reality is it's probably going to cost you the same amount of money to actually, pay everybody off and finish it and close it down. So there is a third option where we basically effectively, again, take the same amount of money, but we actually invest it into a free model where we put all of that money into the increased print product. The result of that will mean that we can actually charge more money on per capital cost from an advertising perspective. There's a big job to be done in the market, both from a perception perspective, a rebranding perspective, all of these various things. But we feel that actually, if you want to create a product that has longevity beyond its current kind of, 3 year timeline, whatever it is, then the best way of basically doing that will be to follow the free option. So in a way, as I say, it's the least brave option, because
so it's sort of a decision that
it kind of made itself. Yeah. And the same with the independent. I think, the challenge with the independent was that you had this brilliant brand that really stood for something. I mean, I remember when I used to go over to the States and, we used to see the agencies and the clients over there. What they absolutely loved about it was, first and foremost, it's called the independent, in a really, I mean, no more than now, but in a really kind of polarized place like the US, the idea of having a brand called the independent was really powerful. So we knew that there was something big there. The problem is that it was stuck behind this kind of, really struggling print offering. And the reality is that when you talk to, whether it be clients or agencies or whoever it is, when you have the kind of almost the shop window being this struggling vehicle, and you're sort of trying to sell this amazing thing that's in the back room, no one's coming in the shop. So the only way that we could actually kind of bring that sort of thing from the back room into the front was to effectively, as we beautifully called it, and is now frequently said, sunset the print edition, which basically just meant that we were then free to take the print edition's legacy, but actually kind of bring the digital end to the forefront. So, I mean, bravery in some eyes, but absolute necessity, because otherwise, the other option is just, the end.
It sounds like a lot of success you had there, though, and so it seems like every decision you made turned to gold.
And I made them all on my own.
Well, all on your own. So well done you, John. Well done you, John.
Thanks.
But something that we also, because I think we learn through our mistakes, and so what's something that we do like to ask is, so through that time, what was your biggest fuck up, John? And actually, more importantly, what did you learn from that? Because we all learn through our fuck ups.
Yeah, do you know what? I thought about this quite a lot, and I think the reality is there's probably no one sort of big smoking gun fuck up that was ever made. I think, you touched on it earlier. I think the reality is the biggest fuck ups I think I've ever made have been the decisions that I didn't make, or that I didn't make quick enough.
That's one of Rachel's favourite.
Well, no, I said it earlier.
But it's true.
It's true. Everything I say is true, Marco.
Yeah, well, it's inspiration.
I think let the record state that is absolutely good. Yeah, I think it's really true. And I think it's there are a lot of times where, for example, individuals, stayed too long, or, it was very clear that there was a toxic, culture developing as a result of some of these things. And I kind of chose to avoid it rather than sort of take it head on. So there's sort of small things like that. But equally, if I felt really strongly about making big decisions or making big punts on big plays and then just didn't do it because of, whatever pushback I got, I think, my only time, if I had it again, would be that I'd have probably been a lot more aggressive with things that I believed in. And I think now, looking at it through the prism of what I do now, if I see something not working and I don't pivot really quickly, then I know that it's going to cost me, it will cost the team, it will cost the business. And that's something that nobody else is going to solve other than me.
But you're the boss, though, isn't it?
Well,
is it confidence you can make those decisions when you're a leader in a matrix organisation? Is it not confidence to make those? Or everybody feels judged. You talked earlier, in corporate world, I think we feel judged. You're the boss, you make the decision and make it quick.
I don't think it's just about being the boss. I think it's about having the ability to get out your own way.
Right.
I think in a corporate culture, you have multiple stakeholders who are all basically, giving you their opinion and telling you what you should and shouldn't do. And you're never going to please everybody. So you, again, just choose the least worst option if you can. And that's never what you believe. It's always, well, what's going to get me through this? So it's always what's going to solve the problem in the room, not necessarily what's going to solve the problem. And I think when you're doing it yourself, whether you want to call it that, you're the boss or it's your company or whatever, fundamentally that if you don't make the right decision, then everything that you can see in your future potentially fails.
Yeah.
So
don't put your head in the sand.
It's
Don't put your head in the
existential.
sand.
That's it. Everything is existential. And if you don't make that decision, no one else is going to make it for you. You ain't getting that salary drop in your monthly account. So it's an existential decision every time.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. If someone asks me about what advice I'd give someone, to get through corporate life, I guess, as a reflection of how I did it, I would say that I pushed back probably too much against various bosses at various
Really, Marco?
times.
You never push back. What?
I mean,
no.
a couple of them were terrible human beings. So, what would you expect? But anyone who knows me and anyone who worked for me knows that's what I did.
Yeah.
And that cost me in the world of corporate progression. That probably cost me. So, I might say to someone, pick your battles basically, and don't sort of fight for everything all the time, because that eventually gets you into trouble as well. And so I think there is that balance, isn't there? Because the great thing about doing your own business is you can make those decisions. I think in corporate world, I think you do, you can get away with it to a point, but it can also cost you if you're too forthright about it.
Pick your battles, I think, is a good one.
Your battles,
And I think I was probably the opposite end of that, where I didn't battle enough. Whereas now, not that I sort of go out there with my fists flailing and all the rest of it, but I think it's not even about caring about the decisions more. It's understanding the immediate impact that those decisions will have on my team and me if I don't make them.
Yeah.
So I think it's just bringing it front and centre that you absolutely have to own what's going on immediately and do something about it. And I don't necessarily think I had the confidence within the corporate framework. And also the corporate framework, I think, promotes either one of the two. Either promotes a culture of conflict or it promotes a culture of kind of subservience, and it doesn't really kind of want to bring out any kind of individuality. So you just end up sort of slotting into whatever that box is.
And so when you think back on those times, whether it was the bigger decisions, whether it was the difficult times, through the career, how much did you lean on like mentors to help you through that, or people who in some way influence you to navigate through?
It's a great question. Thinking the word mentor is an interesting thing, because for me, when I think about mentor, I always think about, someone having a hotline to a former chief at ICI who they would phone up and they would get wisdom from and all the rest of it. And I think the reality is that for me, mentors can be any level, anywhere, and they're people that basically you lean on to get good advice. And I think I've been very, very lucky in my career, and that I've been surrounded by some brilliant people who have helped me kind of be myself and excel through being myself. And there's many people that I can name, but I think one person who probably deserves the most credit actually is a guy, Steve Atkinson, when I was at the Mail on Sunday. And I owe Steve a lot of credit, because the point that you mentioned earlier on about the sort of the top and tailing of creativity, it was kind of Steve that sort of made me realise that my creative side, the drama side, all of that kind of stuff was actually a real feature, not a bug in corporate life. And I think before that point, I'd sort of tried to fit into a sort of a weird jigsaw puzzle that I didn't quite get into, because I wasn't particularly corporate. I worked out that I was more numerate than I ever knew that I was, but I sort of still felt that I'm just stifling what I really want to do. And what Steve sort of helped me understand was that, my sort of drama background would make me potentially a really good presenter. My take on presentations would mean that, fuck PowerPoint, I could basically create a real storytelling experience in a show. And that, to a degree, I think became my thing when I was in media, that I would always sort of be pretty strong at giving presentations to big groups of people. But also when I'm kind of, documenting things or putting pictures together, all this kind of stuff, it came with just a much more creative flair. And I think it just allowed me to scratch that itch. And so the reason why I kind of excelled from being at that sort of base camp sales exec level through the ranks was primarily because Steve sort of fed that a lot, and he was very keen to do it. And we did some crazy fun shit at the Mail on Sunday. I mean, it was my first experience of proper culture, and some of it now would literally never make it to the light of day, as you can imagine. But it was
quite lavish.
It was mental, and it wasn't just the sort of the grotesque nature of the spending that was going on, which was a significant part of it. But
Cannes yachts in Cannes.
No, we didn't know this was pre-Cannes yacht. No, we were doing conferences in Barbados for literally 2 days and that kind of stuff, which was very good fun. But I think it was that culture of success and reward, and I think there was the real empowerment that came about, through the Mail on Sunday. And I think it was kind of basically whoever you were, we were going to bring the best out of you.
Yeah, because that's when you were talking about, we talk about bring your whole self to work. And when you can, don't pretend to be somebody else, you can thrive.
That's it.
And it really feels like that was thriving.
Those are the things that I really enjoyed. I mean, I loved... I loved obviously the leadership element and sort of creating a culture and all of that. But what I really loved was just being out there and presenting new ideas and, going. And that's what I do now when we go out and talk to talent agents, or when we, are talking to talent about new shows or ideas that we've got. This is what I love doing. I love telling stories. I love painting pictures about the possible. And I think that's, all of that kind of stuff, whether it be the rave stuff, whether it be the drama stuff, that's the thing that's always excited me. It's about, telling great stories.
Yeah,
what was it though, looking back, was that a natural journey to, or like just thinking about
failed drama student goes into sales?
Yeah.
No, I've never heard of it before.
I'm interested in if you were advising someone else, for instance, who was following a similar path, is there something you'd have done differently to get to this point quicker, or do you think you had to go through all that stuff to sort of feel confident enough to?
It's a fantastic question, actually, and I think I definitely could have got there quicker if I'd have had the confidence in my creative abilities to go down that route. And I think whether it's in my own head or other people, I think anything that I was doing creatively, whether it was writing music, whether it's producing music, whether it was acting, whether any of these things, I always felt that I was, good, but not quite good enough. And I always felt that I was probably okay at loads of different things, but not particularly brilliant at any one thing. And so I think, as is probably the story of my career up to this point, really, is I just basically found whatever that kind of, not lowest common denominator, but the sort of the least worst option might be. And the fact that I think at the time, I just, as I say, I'd just come out of this rave sort of industry, and I realised that I needed to get, in inverted commas, a proper job. And I sort of basically took the first thing, and newspapers were interesting to me, and it felt like it was a creative job. I think what you don't realise is when you go into sales, particularly in media sales, that you are kind of creative adjacent rather than being creative.
Yeah, it's a numbers business.
It's a numbers business, and I think if you always wanted to do that, there will always be an element of frustration. And so I think if I had my time again, I would just say, lose a year getting the skills, getting the confidence, whatever it might be, to get the job that you actually want and go through that process, and see what would happen. I think at that time I was also probably wrongly motivated by the wrong things, because I thought that you needed to have a big salary really quickly. I thought that you needed to have, there was a lot of wanting to please a load of people by having this big sort of corporate job, so you end up making decisions for other people. So I think my advice to my former self would be to actually sort of sit down and work out actually what you want, and then work out what that path actually looks like, rather than one you've taken. I wouldn't regret anything, I wouldn't change anything, but I definitely think you could have got there sooner.
That is such an important point. I think if younger people are listening early in their careers, we spend way too much time thinking about ourselves and what other people think about
100%.
us, when in reality they're not, right? And to your point, you end up making decisions because you're like, well, how would this look, and does it look like a sideways move, and should I be earning more money? And it's corrosive in in terms of your happiness.
Yeah,
because
it is.
You know, fundamentally, you're not doing it for the right reasons. So I always say to people, like, stop worrying about other people. They're not thinking about you. It's you that's thinking about them.
The best advice that I've been given in the last year or so, which is, you know, relatively obvious but very new to me, is to just always put yourself at the centre of the situation and work out exactly what everything looks like through that prism. Because the reality is, if you don't, and it's not about selfishness or self-centeredness or anything else, it's about trusting your own instincts as to what is right. So when I look at this business, I have to believe that this business will be a success based on my ability to make the right decisions from what I think is right based on the judgment of all those around me and the input of those around me. But you ultimately have to put yourself at the centre of that decision. And I think what I was probably doing in the past was worrying about the impact on X, or worrying about the client, or worrying about, well, what happens if I don't give them that business, or what happens if they... And I remember, I mean, you said something the other day about the importance of saying no. And I loved it, because I think that speaks to exactly what I'm talking about now, is that people don't mind a no. In fact, a no is better, because it means that they can 100%. Carry on and do other things. It's, you know, kind of, you're thinking that this is better for them, for me to string it out and string it on. It ain't.
The worst thing.
You know, and so for me, it's that sort of, right, put yourself at the centre of it. What do you want to get out of this? Don't worry about anybody else for now. What do you want to get out of it? What decision is going to give you the best outcome? And then it's a question of working out from there what the process then looks like from there on in. And it really was the best advice I've been given, and I just never really thought about it before.
Is that hard to do, though, at the early stages of your career, though? I mean, it almost sounds like the benefit of hindsight. Is that harder for somebody to do as they start out? I think you can still... You can work out what you want to do, and you can work out what that path might look like. You've got to be prepared that there's going to be a million bumps in that road, and it ain't going to come up how you expect it to. But I think at least having that sort of clear-mindedness from day one, that actually where I really want to get to is X, and this is the path, this is the traditional path, and you know, this is the way I'm going to approach it. I think I definitely didn't have that. I think if I was to look at what my North Star was aged 1920, it was basically get a job. It wasn't, you know, get a job and earn some money. It wasn't, I want to basically redefine media publishing. I want to basically, you know, create a new version of audio that's downloadable and on demand and all that. You know, it was none of that. It was basically just get a job, pay for beers, you know, buy clothes that don't make me look like a tramp, all of that kind of stuff. Failed. But yeah, I think, and that was it. And so I think just having a more clearer idea, and you're 1920, most people are going to be thinking get a job, buy clothes, you know, get drunk and all the rest of it. But I think it's at least having a view of where you want to be in the world at the end of it. Yeah, but also not being too, I suppose, holding on to the plan. Yeah, that's like, because I think sometimes if you say, like, I've got this 5-year plan, and as you say, things don't turn out sometimes as you think. And I think when you say the power of no, I think it is having boundaries, and as you say, it's much better to say no sometimes, but also the power of yes. Like, actually, when you're early in your career, put your hand up for as many things as you can, get involved in as many things, because it is all about learning, isn't it? And just 100%. Working with different people and learning, because that's how you do learn through mentor. I mean, we're called mentor because you know, we want to hear from people that have been there. We're not going to get into the work from home thing, but I mean, it's all wrapped up in that. You know, that you know, you were talking about people who's influenced you, that you worked with. I remember a similar influence on me where I really wanted to, I was in that digital space and I wanted to go to conferences and things like that. And everyone I worked with at the time was like, you know, you're just slacking. That's not work, you know. And I always found that sort of it didn't motivate me, and I thought it was wrong. Yeah. And then I get this boss in America who's quite a mad guy. Sadly, passed away now. He was very young, incredibly healthy, but just got lung cancer, and that was that. But he came along and he's like, "Listen, Marco, get over to CES, go to Cannes, go to this, go to that. You know, just be there, because no client wants to hear third hand from their Facebook rep that some new ad product's coming. What they want to hear is, I just walked out the Apple studios at the Apple HQ, and you know what I heard there was X."
And it was completely liberating to me, and sort of validated, I guess, what I thought. And I think that's where people have that real impact on you, is if they recognise something in you that sort of frees you up to do.
I think, while Steve sort of definitely, encouraged me to embrace my creative side, I think the person who probably has influenced my business side is probably, I'd say, Stephen Myron more than anyone. Just because he's probably one of the most sort of direct and articulate people that I know. He has the ability to soak up an incredible amount of information and kind of effectively work out the most appropriate plan of action for it. And I think one of the things that was great about Stephen is his methods are not for everyone. And so I would find myself in a meeting with Stephen where I went in with what I thought was a beautiful gift of a piece of work that I'd done. And I would come out literally rinsed to within an inch of my life and wondering which London Bridge I should now throw myself off. But the problem is that he was always right. And what he was always questioning was, what could you do better? Is this the best that you could do? This isn't particularly ambitious. And regardless of the way it was said, the impact that it had on me was, he's fucking right. We've gone down route one here. We should be trying to explode something. We should be really trying to make a lot more noise than we're actually doing. And I think, the reason why I am like I am now from a business perspective and why I do push hard is because I want to get the best out of everybody else in the same way that Stephen was trying to get the best out of me. And I think, that for me has really stuck with me, and that kind of rigidity of sort of knowing that actually everything has to be born back to a business decision. It's all very well doing all this over here, but what's the outcome? So I became much more outcome focused as a result of it. I'm much more kind of, I suppose, business literate as a result. And so when you kind of look at all the sum total of these kind of influences, whether it be Steve on the creative side or Steve Myron on the Stephen Myron on the on the sort of the business side, it's kind of all added up to sort of me kind of getting that sort of full rounded approach to how I view things now. And it's not just those, because of my sort of, athletic pursuits outside of work and everything else, obviously I come into contact with a lot of really influential coaches and athletes as well. And I think I take a lot of my inspiration from a lot of the things that they say. And of course, a lot of the things they talk about is work ethic and about attitude. And I think certainly given the stuff that I have done through my sort of time in athleticism, I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing if I didn't have the right attitude, if I didn't have the right approach, and if I didn't take things the right way. And so having coaches that are able to kind of understand the type of athlete you are and the type of approach that will work with you is, again, really, really helpful with me when I'm working with people in my industry, because whether it's with talent or producers or, with people on the sales team, everybody, is an athlete. They are all basically wanting to work at the top of their potential. And you've got to work out what the best approach is for each of them. And having that kind of coach's perspective as to the types of people that you're working with not only informs how you bring them in the first place to make sure that you are bringing in the right people for that business, but also how you can get the best performance out of them when they're actually kind of in situ. So all of these things together, all of these influences, all of these different mentors, all kind of influence what makes my decision making today, really, I suppose.
And it's no surprise, is it, that all these athletes do go on to be inspirational coaches and mentors, and go into teams to talk about how do we get performance, how do we get a high performance team. I was going to actually come back to that, your sport and athleticism.
Is that the word?
Apparently,
it was overblown
because obviously you literally run at 100 miles an hour. And one thing we do like to ask is about, do you have a work hack? Is exercise your work hack? Is that how allows you to thrive when you're in work? You've got to do something to balance, surely.
Yeah, 100% it is. Inadvertently, I've become a member of this ridiculous new 5 a.m. club, which I didn't even realise it was a club. I definitely don't want to join it, put it like that. But I've worked out that I am without question, at my most productive between the hours of about 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning.
Wow.
And
I'm in bed at that time.
that's absolutely where probably most people should be. But I mean, I wake, I'm alert, I'm thinking, and the creative side of my brain is already in overdrive at that point. And so if I want to do anything that's writing an email that needs to be particularly well constructed, if I'm writing a presentation, if I need to create a strategy for an element of our business, it will always happen through that time. Now, the mechanic by which I sort of manifest that is almost always through exercise. So, you know, when I look at my sort of regime, which obviously involves swimming and cycling and running for my triathlon stuff, swimming is almost my kind of day organizer because it's so boring. You're literally just doing up and down lengths all the way through. And so I basically occupy my mind by literally playing through the diary of my day so I can work out what meeting's happening, what I'm going to be saying in that meeting, what the potential outcomes are, how I might potentially approach something. And it's a really good organizer. Cycling, I think, is my almost presentation creator, because once you get through the first sort of 20 minutes, your brain is in the zone a little bit and you can just sort of start thinking outside the box. Whereas running, for me, is absolute problem solver 101, because what running does is it creates an almost immediate pain impact that just tells your body that, you know, it's going to focus on this. So any brain fog that might have been there, it's got no time to deal with that brain fog. That's all now focusing on your legs and focusing on the adrenaline pumping through your body. What it does is just give you that absolute clarity. It doesn't always mean you'll solve the problem completely, but you will have a solution by the end of it, and you will be in a much better place by the end of it. And so for me, I mean, whether it's a hack or what, it's something that I lean into to such a degree that I think, you know, when I'm injured or if I'm ill and I can't do it, I really have to actively find workarounds that sort of get me into the same space, because otherwise, you know, if you have relatively addictive personalities, if I don't have these things, then you're suddenly like, oh shit, the world's ending. So you have to kind of create extra hacks around it. But yeah, for me, definitely that's my.
If I'm honest, I'm definitely one of those people who feels the pressure of the 5 a.m. club in that.
You
do you know what I mean? Like the sort of Stephen Bartlett stuff and the you know, Jon O'Donnell stuff about.
Do you know what?
You've got to be a triathlete.
I feel a bit of pressure. I'm like, I don't want to. I love the exercise stuff. I 100% agree. I've solved a lot of things running. Swimming is so boring. I can't do that, but I will swim a little bit. But I do think there's a bit of if you want to be successful, you have to want to get up at 5 a.m. And I think that's quite an interesting, you know, it's an interesting, it totally makes sense that for some people it works. But
yeah, it's not one size fits all, is it?
I don't know whether you should feel bad about not being in the club.
We're not judging anyone, though, are we? I think that's the other thing. Like,
I don't feel judged. I
don't judge you for not being up at 5 a.m.
Well, listen, someone's got to walk the dog.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're up at 6. You're up at 6, aren't you? But I think again, though, I think you don't have to be a triathlete, but I do think some form of exercise, even if that is only walking the dog, not just from organising your day or creativity or problem solving, just for your own mental health. So I think we can all perhaps do a walk a day or something like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think, sadly, we've come to our time. And, John, that was brilliant. I mean, look, I just think...
I loved it. Thank you.
I really hope our listeners have also got something out of that. But, look, thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it.
Very inspirational.
I loved it. Thanks, you so much for having me both. And good luck with the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I just thought that was amazing. I mean, John talks... He talks fast. He's got a great podcast voice, though, hasn't he? I loved that focus on sort of the worst decisions are the ones you didn't make, and I know that's something you.
Well, I like to say that. Yeah,
I've heard that come from you as well. So, you know, that to me, I think if you're listening, is a really important lesson and something that is really worth thinking about.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, I love a quote, an inspirational quote. And I love this book by Richard Reed, If I Could Tell You Just One Thing, that he's picked up lots of advice from famous people along the way. And this one is a particular favourite for me because it's Joanna Lumley.
Wow.
And
Who doesn't?
I mean, who doesn't?
Joanna?
And I've got to say, I grew up on Ab Fab. I think I was Joanna and my friend Catherine was Patsy.
You do have elements.
Do I? Yeah.
You do have elements.
Yeah,
of
let's
it, be
get
honest.
all the elements of it. Yeah, I would have loved to have worked in PR, but anyway. But this is something that Joanna said to Richard Reed as he was fortunate enough to sit next to her at an industry dinner, and I won't be able to do it in her voice, but if I could, the secret, darling, is to love everyone you meet from the moment you meet them. Give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Start from a position that they are lovely and that you will love them. Most people will respond to that and be lovely and love you back. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you can achieve the most wonderful things. So I do live my life through that, a bit of like Anne of Green Gables, as my husband would call me. But this is actually what was really good about it. And then she leant forward and whispered into Richard's ear and said, but get rid of any of the bastards that let you down. And so I think that is probably good advice for us all.
I definitely lean towards the last bit.
Yeah, and I probably lean towards the beginning bit. I am very much
cup. We're a perfect duo.
I am cup half full. I will see the goodness in everyone, even you, Marco. Anyway, I think that's all we've got time for.
Mentor is a Viral Tribe entertainment production.
And don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify.
I think that's it. Join us next week for more pearls of wisdom on the Mentor podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.